Buongiorno, buonasera. It's welcome to this evening's webinar, which is part of the worldwide webinar series of 5 webinars. European Parkinson's Therapy Centre is hosting these really to try and seek out knowledge and give information to people with Parkinson's to help them understand better their Parkinson's and improve their lives. Today's webinar is actually hosted by ourselves, and we'll be focusing very much on a subject which is very dear to the hearts of many people, not mine. I hate it. Exercise. European Parkinson is an international centre operating in 45 countries. We focus on quality of life, learning how to live with Parkinson's, and offering the latest exercise therapy, which makes a difference to people's lives. Of course, nutrition, relaxation, and other elements are essential and are covered extensively in our one-week program. But exercise is medicine. It wasn't me who said that, some American, I assume. I also want to touch on the concept of how we handle our Parkinson's as being a key element on how we live with our Parkinson's and how we can be better informed. If you want to ask a question, do just type in the YouTube chat and that question will come through to me. I'd like to start by asking each of our guests to introduce themselves. Why? Because I'm hopeless at introducing people. So what I'd like to do is, especially as I'm touched and honored to have Melissa of PD Warriors. I'm touched because it's around 4 o'clock in the morning for her. And honored because PD Warriors are doing a number of exciting projects in a number of countries and offer a lot to the PD world. And a lot of the clients who come to us are very, very pleased with the work they do with PD Warriors. Melissa, could you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thanks, Alex, and thank you so much for hosting this session. So my name is Melissa. I'm a physiotherapist by background and founder of the PD Warrior program. PD Warrior has been running for about 12 years through various different iterations, especially as the evidence has continued to help us refine the program. We're based in 10 countries. We've translated our program into 4 different languages. And we have now trained probably close to 7,000 physiotherapists in our various different stages of the program as well. So very excited. I've just learned so much through developing the program. It's very much based on exercise, but I think what we've found is that people come for the exercise and stay for the community. So we're very much about building the connections as well. So exactly what you've got behind you there, Polly.
Actually, that moves on to Polly. Would you like to just say a couple of words?
Absolutely. I'm Polly Dawkins, and I'm Executive Director of the Phinney Foundation for Parkinson's, and we are based in Colorado in the United States, though our work is really global, mostly in North America, but people reach our work from all over 146 different countries. We focus, our mission is to help people with Parkinson's live well today. And that has been our mission since the organization was founded 19 years ago by Phinney, a former professional athlete who was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 40. And that's what our work is surrounding, is quality of life in the Parkinson's community. That's what we do.
I'm going backwards around the clock, so Pietro Domestici.
Hi everyone, I'm Pietro Domestici. I'm from Northern Italy in Boario Center. I'm a physiotherapist and a PowerMove certified therapist and PowerMove faculty. The only at the moment the only PowerMove faculty in Europe. I'm working with Alex. Alex is my director of the European Parkinson Therapy Center. And I think our method is following the other method my colleagues are explaining. The quality of life is our first aim, and we base our method in our protocol in 4 pillars, not just exercise, but also medicine, lifestyle, and psychological aspects about Parkinson. So all the aspects of Parkinson are taken care of, and that's it.
WhatsApp conversation to find John M. Dean, who, if I can pronounce this, is the chair of the Health Professional Special Interest Group International Parkinson's and Movement Disorder Society. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Absolutely correct. Yesterday we just celebrated World Movement Disorders Day, actually, with the International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society. So that's a pro bono position that I'm acting as the chair for the Health Professional SIG. I'm also a speech-language pathologist specializing in Parkinson's, and I collaborate with a wonderful physiotherapist, Josepha Domingos, on a dual-task approach that combines movement, voice, and cognition. And I know Josepha just came over to your clinic a couple weeks ago for a little visit, and Pietro, she spoke very highly of you, by the way. She said you had a great presence with your patients. It's great.
Okay. What I'd like to do actually is just continue talking to you, John, just for a moment, because you're calling from Portugal, but you're American. What are you doing in Portugal?
Well, it began with a collaboration that I began with Josepha maybe in 2011 at a training program where we started working together. And we kept working back and forth. And maybe in 2013, 2014, I started coming over here to do some collaborations, and then we would do programs. And so just continued from there. I've had a lot of different twists and turns as I think many of us do in our career, and I found myself here. In 2018, we actually launched a startup where we were delivering our exercise programs using technologies. Portugal was a really wonderful place to do technology work. It has a really great workforce, and it's a nice lifestyle. And it's continued ever since.
Parkinson's Therapy Center is a great believer in early intervention. That is, getting people with Parkinson who are newly diagnosed the information they need as fast as possible. Indeed, we are the people who set up the First Steps program for Steve Ford back in his day. That was 9 years ago. And we're just now moving that online, because we think it should be free to everybody newly diagnosed with Parkinson, getting the right information at the right time so that they don't fall into the trap of despair, anxiety, depression, fear, and apathy, which are common words in the Parkinson world. I have Parkinson for 17 years, so I've met one or two of those words. I do want to know that the Movement Disorder Society is really focused on education of health professionals, but we know that referrals are quite low, especially early referral. What can people living with Parkinson's and their care partners do to guide their doctors towards giving them earlier referral?
You hit on a very interesting subject, because I was just reviewing a video from one of their educational programs. The International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society is the largest organization of providers, primarily doctors, but also allied health providers such as speech therapists and physios and psychologists and nurses. And during this session that I was watching, they actually were reviewing a research study where they went to 23 different centers of excellence, and those are Parkinson Foundation centers that have high quality training. And they found even within those centers that only about just a little over a third of people were getting referral to a physical therapist or an occupational or speech therapist, and most of those are going to the physios. So I think that relying on your doctor to make the referrals is only one piece of that, and it's probably not the best way. You need to advocate for yourself. And then as a healthcare provider myself, I think it's really important to have cross-discipline. You know, we know that interdisciplinary care really is the best way to approach things. I think Dr. Bloom's work with Parkinson has really established that. So you need to advocate. Hopefully you're working with clinicians that understand the value, you know, of getting another discipline involved. You know, falls are a good example where we're quite focused on it, and referrals generally go to physio. But I look at falls as having a cognitive component and having ADL changes in activities of daily living. So I see a room for a lot of the disciplines, and so you need to have all pieces of it. A doctor that knows how to do the referrals, therapists that are working together, and then you living with Parkinson's, taking control, asking for those referrals.
But there are very few centers which actually do offer all of that information in one place. It must be difficult to find places to refer people to. I mean, obviously, I know Davis Phinney do it, we do it, Parkinson UK do a lot of work in that area. Are you working with clinics to actually establish them as a multi-center?
The international body really works to educate the healthcare providers. So the centers usually come through different entities, but they actually have a directory, and it's free and it's open to the public. So if you're looking for a healthcare provider, you could go enter into their publicly available Movement Disorder Society directory, and you could find somebody. And if you're a clinician that's a member of the MDS, and again, if you are working with people with Parkinson's, you really should, you can actually be added to that directory to make sure people could find you. It works all around the world.
Good. Melissa, I'm going to ask you a question which you probably ask quite often, and it's probably a pretty obvious answer. What's the difference between a PD Warriors Parkinson gym and a normal gym? Why would someone with Parkinson go to a PD Warriors gym? You must be doing something there which is different from a normal gym.
Yes, Alex, it is definitely a question that we get asked a lot. And I think one of the biggest differences is that, you know, just as you'd go to a gym or walk the dog, that's fantastic exercise for your general health, and we certainly advocate for movement. But I think the biggest difference is that our exercise approach is Parkinson specific, which essentially means we're following the literature, we're looking at what impacts people with Parkinson's the most, and it's very tailored to every individual. So, you know, whether they present with slow, small movements and that bothers them the most in their function, or whether they are struggling to do the dual tasks that you're talking about, John, and that's really impacting on their ability to work or look after the grandchildren or whatever it might be. So it's very much tailored to the individual, how they're struggling on a daily basis and what their goals are. And I think key to PD Warrior and its success is very much that we use exercise, excuse me, as that vehicle to educate and empower individuals. And we're very big on building self-efficacy, confidence, getting people back to doing activities that they either are not doing or doing them better. We know that people can start to retract their social participation, their enjoyment in other activities in life. And so we're very big on trying to get people back to doing those activities. So it's not about coming to PD Warrior for the rest of your life. It's about having a kickstart, a rehab program, learning what works for you, and then going back to whatever activity it might be. We often get asked whether it's going to improve their golf handicap or not, and I can't guarantee that, but you know, it's about getting back to golf if they had stopped playing it. And you know, alongside that, we've got the 4 pillars. So it's exercise, it's around mindset and behavior change. So it's around helping people to bring exercise into their daily life for the rest of their life. We all need to exercise, and it's understanding specifics around that for each individual with their Parkinson's. It's about that education and empowering individuals, building that self-efficacy, and very much the support and the network that they come for. As I said before, most people often come for the exercise, but they stay for the community that builds around them. It's very much about, you know, supporting people through the journey at every different stage.
Yeah, that's great. Pietro, if I could come to you, you're a member of our own staff here. You spent 6 weeks out with Becky Farley in Arizona. Indeed, I came out to visit you, working, of course. Well, I did, I think, half a day's work. But Becky must have given you something and giving you something to bring back other than the suntan. What did you bring back from Arizona?
Yes, for me, the Arizona trip was a very good experience, an honor to go back to go there and to be trained like a faculty directly from Dr. Becky Farley, who was one of the most famous doctor and physical therapist in Parkinson's disease. Power moves, I learned a lot about power moves and how to treat people with Parkinson, the importance of exercise and of exercise, not just in the gym, but also outside. So like Melissa was talking about the importance of apply all the exercise and what you learn into the gym, also outside in the real life. And this is what maybe is the most important thing to learn and to educate also the people with Parkinson to know about the exercise, not just in the gym, but also outside in their home. So it's important also for PWR moves, for the power moves method, to train the functional mobility. So the function, so the daily life movement, so the movement of the daily life, for example, like sit to stand or just reach something in the kitchen or turn in the bed or get off the bed. So the easier that in Parkinson are the most difficult movement of the daily life that are function, about the function. So I brought back home a lot of different exercise and techniques to apply, and also a method to apply with our client, where the last step is always the function.
Okay, Polly, I know for a fact that you're a fan of exercise. You cycled across the top of our valley, cleverly avoiding our centre. The problem with Parkinson's is, I'll be honest, we get a bit lazy. We can get a bit apathetic. If we can avoid doing something, we start to tend not to do things. And that's not a good thing. It's that apathy word again. How do you see how you can motivate people with Parkinson's to be involved in their own wellness? That's, after all, what Davis Phinney is very much about. I know you have a program called Every Victory Counts. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, we look at it as most of you do, very holistically. So, I mean, I think the first issue that we're probably not going to talk about today is even getting a diagnosis, right? Even having access to healthcare providers and teams to even understand that you have Parkinson's. That's probably a whole nother webinar about health equity and health disparities and who's not even being treated. So let's leave that. Let's assume that you already have a diagnosis and you are at that point, Alex, as you're saying, is like, how do I set up my life to live well? What do I need to do to have the systems around me support me so that I can live well? So that when you get into a stuck place, when you get into an area of lack of motivation or apathy, you've got the support systems around you that are going to help nudge you in that direction. So really the number one thing that we think about is creating a social environment that makes living well easy. And so you think about, well, what does that mean? What is the social environment? And there are a number, the social environment is your sort of the groups you belong to, the neighborhoods you live in, how you organize your home, who's supporting you, and generally how you order your life. And creating that social environment to make living well easy means, a handful of different things. That means connecting with other people who care about you and understand your situation. And as Melissa mentioned, that community, that connection, whether it's people with Parkinson's or it's your family or it's a combination of others, creating that group of people around you who care about you and connect with those folks daily. Then it's also about finding resources in your local community to support you. So it's finding the exercise classes, finding social and emotional support groups, finding good health care, and scheduling your interactions with those resources. The exercise, as we all care so deeply about in this group, is probably one of the most important pieces to that. So going back to your question, well, how do you get over the apathy, or how do you continue your motivation when you just don't feel like it? I think that's a human issue. That's not just a Parkinson's issue. And that's some of the thing that we struggle with when we think about somebody who does get a diagnosis. If you've not been an exerciser in your entire life, you've never organized your life around exercise, how do you all of a sudden start to incorporate that into your life and make that a priority? Because we know everything will feel better eventually if you exercise. All of your symptoms will feel better if you exercise. So creating workout partners, scheduling routines. Like, do you know, like, for example, this morning, I'm not living with Parkinson's, so that's a little easier, a lot easier. But I have a routine every single morning. I get up, I set my alarm, I go, I put my workout clothes out, I go, because it's part of my routine. It's having that routine, it's having those workout partners, it's having that people who are expecting you to show up for those exercise sessions. So I don't want to dominate the many other factors to creating your social environment, but those are the things that we know will help you, support you, and push you along.
John, alongside exercise, there are other things that can be used to help people with Parkinson's. Technology can play a huge role in helping people with Parkinson's. Through your work with technology via MDS and others, what kind of technological tools can someone living with Parkinson use right now to improve their day-to-day quality of life?
I want to take it a little bit towards some of the goals that I think you see in the Every Victory Counts manual and the EVC, kind of pointing back to the foundation, because there are things that I think you could use to improve some of those factors that they mentioned. So if you improve your ability to sleep and you improve the quality of the sleep, and maybe you can monitor when you're having issues, that's valuable. And that's something, again, that you can do right now to take a little bit of control. So I love fancy toys, and I'm always buying stuff. That's not the kind of technology I think someone with Parkinson's should be looking for. You should be looking for things that have been out for a while that we've been using. And again, that's one factor right there. She talks about social connection. I think we've all dealt with over the past couple of years with the pandemic, using some of the tools to stay connected. And it's not just Zoom classes, although those have been valuable, but it's also the ability to stay connected with your family via those kind of tools. And so there are some interesting things that I see out there with virtual reality and all that kind of stuff. I'm putting that aside a little bit. You take advantage of the way that you can use the things that are already available with your phone. Like, again, coming back to sleep, there are things that you can track your sleep with. There are apps that can give you cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. The VA, the Veterans Administration in the US, put out an app for that that's very valuable. Some of the meditation apps. So you can take those tools and use them to go towards living well today. And that's where I think I'd spend my energy. Not bleeding edge, brand new. Part of that, getting back to Polly's talk about equity, the brand new fancy stuff, that's expensive, that's great, that leaves a lot of people behind. There are things that many people have access to that you can use to take advantage of that.
Okay, Melissa, I'm going to be cruel to you. I apologize for this question. What's the difference between a physiotherapist and a neurological physiotherapist? You said you train physiotherapists. Why do they need training? Don't they already know? What do you train them with?
Such a good question. Yeah, look, such a good question. I think it's the same. I think most people would appreciate lawyers. You might have a tax lawyer, or you might have a family or a criminal lawyer. They've all got different specialties. It's the same for physiotherapy. You know, I feel like my husband certainly married me under false pretenses. He'll ask me if I can fix his knee, and I'm like, well, I know where your knee is, but that's about as much as I'm going to get involved. So, you know, my deal is about the brain, about the body, about movement, about rehab, and my training is very much focused around that. I've done special training in neurological rehab, so masters, and then I went on to specialize in neurological rehab. And I think that just basically means that I have a broader understanding of neurological conditions, certainly around Parkinson's. And that's essentially what we train through PD Warrior. So when we train our health professionals in PD Warrior, it's very much the fundamentals around neuroplasticity and using the brain's natural ability to rewire itself, and using, as a physiotherapist, we try and train people around how they can improve their function through this neuroplastic training approach. That's something that's not common knowledge. When you say, why doesn't everybody know this? I think neuroplasticity, it's not a new phrase, it's not a new approach. We've been applying that for over 20 years in stroke rehab, MS rehab, brain injury, but it is relatively new in Parkinson's. Probably only the last 5 to 10 years has it been widely adopted. And so I think PD Warrior has definitely helped in that respect, I'd like to think, in terms of bringing neuroplastic training approaches to be more accepted in Parkinson's rehab. And so that's what our training approach is very much around. So we use 10 core exercises as our common language. We teach those exercises. We teach physiotherapists how to adapt those exercises, modify them for each individual, depending on whether they've got a back injury or an upper limb, an arm that they really have problems with, or fine motor control. So we'll really adapt each exercise. And so I guess PD Warrior is very much a framework. It's based on those neuroplastic training approaches, and then we refine that for the individual that we see in front of us, how we're going to help that individual specifically. And that's very much what the PD Warrior approach is built on, training health professionals to assess a client and then use their clinical reasoning based on those foundations of neuroplastic rehab to really help that individual through that journey. So it's quite different to your normal back, neck and knee physiotherapy.
Resonate strongly. What we do is PWR, and what we do here in Italy, I think, is fairly similar. Pietro, you've been training physiotherapists throughout Italy, because we are a training centre for Becky. What's been the reactions from physiotherapists? Like, this is something completely irrelevant, or this is something which is really going to make a life-changing move for their clients?
Yeah, the first reaction is always like a shock, because they don't know how, they don't expect, I think, what is going on in the future with the people with Parkinson. Was it important to train with the people with Parkinson? That is about exercise. So differently from the past physiotherapists, so the physiotherapists from the past, we don't do passive movement or passive manipulation, but just active movement. So we exercise together with the people with Parkinson. So we also have just positive feedbacks, and the people are so motivated and stimulated after the workshop we did here at European Parkinson Training Center. And they are also so eager to learn and to understand what is important to do to help people with Parkinson. That is to relearn the movement that damaged or affected by the neurodegeneration. So we just have positive feedbacks, and they also show joy and happiness to be part of this big family that is the Power Moves family, professional family. And they're ready to do the refresh course that is coming up the next year. So we have created this refresh group because we wanted to give more to our physiotherapists, to our professionals, to be ready to train in the right way the people with Parkinson.
Yeah, if I could come on to you, Polly. I'm going back to psychology again. I'm sorry about that. I have a big issue with psychology, because having Parkinson for 17 years, I have good days, I have bad days, I have good nights, I can't turn over in bed, or there are all sorts of things that happen to me which I don't go around telling everyone else. But it's quite tough sometimes, and you've got to be tough to live with Parkinson's. You certainly need courage. You can't just wimp out at the first sign of a problem. How do you motivate people with Parkinson's? What is it that can encourage them to keep to their goals and not give up? Because a lot of people fall by the wayside.
Yeah. So many people fall by the wayside. It's hard to be an external force in creating motivation. Motivation has got to come from within. So it's about creating the systems to support that, and the feedback loops, the positive feedback loops. So part of what we try to do, Alex, is show stories, success stories, and how individuals are able to overcome the lack of motivation and get through it, and then share those successes or those victories, if you will. You mentioned that courage and determination. I think the one thing we see that everyone who has in common, who's doing well, living with Parkinson's, is that they believe that they can live well. It's the believing that they can live well, and it is sort of that self-efficacy, and that knowing that Parkinson's is just one part of their experience. It's not who you are. It's just a part of who you are. And we see that those folks who believe they can have control, they can take decisions, are doing better. And those folks who are stubborn and absolutely relentless in not giving up and being stubborn. That doesn't mean pushing through pain. That doesn't mean doing things that are irresponsible, but it's being stubborn every single day. And that's what we see. And that, we can talk about that. We can show stories of that. We can give tips and techniques, but it comes down to the individual at the end of the day.
If I could say that I have a huge respect for the people who come to our centre. They've made a decision that they want to learn to live with Parkinson's, and they're going to try and learn the physical methods and the motivational techniques and the food and everything else, and try and learn exactly how they can get the very best out of their life with Parkinson's. And I admire them for that, and we get some remarkable people, really remarkable.
And competitive too. Don't you? I often see folks who are like, well, I'm doing better than that person, and that motivates the person to keep doing better. It's a kind of an odd human condition, but it's a strange condition is Parkinson's.
A lot of our staff, I think, but also Melissa would have the same feeling, I think. When you see somebody who is going through a metamorphosis of, I've got bloody Parkinson's, excuse the language, to, I can live with this, I can get on with life. And they leave at the end of the week with a smile on their face and a determination to get on with their life. That must be hugely rewarding to people like you, Polly, Melissa, and Pietro. Because I know you change lives.
Can I jump in there with a great story? Because this was one of my patients that told me originally. We just started this program. We'd been working patients really intensively, very hard, harder than we'd done before. And not surprisingly, this gentleman had done extremely well through this 10-week challenge. But he was telling me at the end of it, kind of to your point there, Polly, He said, I'm moving better, I'm feeling better, I'm thinking better, but of everything that's happened over the last 10 weeks, it's made me realize that my mate down the road, he's had a triple bypass, my other mate's had a hip fracture, my other friend's got no sense of humor. Like, Parkinson's is just something that I have to live with. And, that was just such a huge lesson for me, 10 years ago, that exercise was that vehicle to help change people's perspectives. And I think if exercise can do anything, it can help with that perspective change. And once you can do that, then you've got opportunities for motivation, this competitive spirit. People are trying to better themselves, to live courageously, live brave. And I think without that perspective change, it's very, very difficult. And so I think it's why it comes back to the psychology that you don't love so much, Alex. I think harnessing that and being able to build people's confidence and self-efficacy and belief of self is just fundamental to living well with Parkinson's.
The core, it's as important as exercise. They go side by side. I go into the office on Saturdays, and my wife always says, why do you go into the office on Saturdays? Well, the truth is, on Saturdays, it's our last day of the week, of the training week, and there's always a little bit of champagne, some pastries, and a little bit of laughter. It's just a lovely environment, because people feeling better about themselves, and that's a big reward, very, very big reward. In terms of John, I heard you work with something called PD3. Does that ring a bell?
That's actually the approach that Josefa and I have been using. Again, we met doing training for something, and then we were on faculty for training something, and then we said, okay, we like the way we're doing this, and so that's the three components that we use: the movement, the voice, and the cognition. And again, I'm a speech language pathologist, and she's a physical therapist, or a physiotherapist, as they call them over here. And that's been our approach ever since we started with it. One thing I like about incorporating a speechy like myself into the mix is that I think we have a slightly different focus, and I can shape things a slightly different way. But then when we teach our classes, we team teach them. So while one person's working on some component, the other can be going to another area. And that's translated when we do online classes. We do a number of online classes that are real-time and interactive. They're not recorded. We have done, actually one just got released by Parkinson's Europe just the other day, that's pre-recorded under Bayal Pharmaceuticals funded that, but typically our classes are live. And so while she's doing her parts of the class, I'm actually watching the class and I'm changing the backgrounds and I'm doing the work like that. And it makes it much more interactive. And so I think those three components are valuable for all dual tasks, but I like our kind of approach by having the speech aspect in there. It's something that I tried to introduce early on when I was being trained. I think I may be the only speech language pathologist trained in PWR. So it's like when we were initially doing that back in the day, I wanted more speech in there. So PD3 is movement, voice, and cognition, the three kind of key primary colors of daily life. And kind of speaking back to you, Melissa, in your approach there, dual task is very valuable. Life is a dual task exercise, and that's, I think, something you've recognized with the PD Warrior for sure.
Yeah, Pietro, if I could just check in with you. You came back from America having spent 6 weeks doing PWR. Is that the only protocol you use at the center, or do you use other protocols, other techniques from other sources, shall we say?
I think we're using the same languages because everyone is saying the same thing. So the important is to train, of course, to exercise, and the component of the exercise should be the first is progressive. So aerobic or strengthening, the exercise should be progressive, or both motor or cognitive, or cognition. So cognition or motor has to be progressive. And the second is to be PD specific. So it means you have to target the function, so the daily activities, so ADL. And of course, the emotional engagement is important to either in one-to-one or in group classes therapy, because it's important to the basal ganglia circuits is also the limbic circuit. So you have to engage socially, emotionally, to also trigger the other circuits that are more damaged or can be more damaged than the limbic one. So I don't remember the question, Alex. Can you say again?
What other therapies do we use in the
This
same?
was just an introduction.
It was J. Albert's, obviously.
Our protocol. So what's our protocol? So we use for the exercise the power moves, of course, and you can just apply power moves at different level of disease severity. So you can use for early diagnosis or for in advanced level of advanced stages of Parkinson. So it's well applied, but of course we integrate what is evidence-based on the literature, on the scientific research. So we follow the guidelines of the new guidelines of literature. So it's an integration of power moves, but also what we learn throughout the years.
Learn from people like Melissa, Joseph.
Yes, of course. They're all amazing. They're doing a great job.
Something new.
Yeah.
Sure. Melissa, you just, I think if I got this right, you just wrote a book.
I wrote it in 20. I'm laughing because I wrote it in 2014 and
I was still
published it in 2018. So I feel like it's old news.
Old news, but still available on Amazon.
It's still available. Yeah, and we did that because we wanted to make I guess the program and the education behind it as accessible as possible. It's analog. People can download it. They can download it on their Kindle, or they can read it. It's got a 10-week challenge approach in there, and yeah, that was probably one of the most terrifying things I'd ever done. Just to put my name to something that I knew all my colleagues would be reading. I'll never forget the night we kind of pressed the button and published. I was like, oh no. But yeah, no, it's done very well. We've sold probably over 15,000 copies. So I'm happy with that.
Done. We actually wrote a book because we had someone from the BBC here. He was a comedy writer. He wrote The Vicar of Dibley, which no one's ever heard of because it's only shown in the UK. But it is a very funny program, and he's a very famous man with Parkinson's, and he said, why don't we write a humorous book about Parkinson's? I said, Parkinson's isn't that funny. He said, yes, it is, and we got about 10 people to write stories which are actually quite humorous, and we sold very well on Amazon. It was a bestseller about the same time as your book. It must be before yours. 8 years ago. It's no longer available on Amazon, but we still give copies to our guests because it gives them a bit of a laugh. And if you don't laugh at Parkinson's, what are you going to do? What I did want to ask was, John, we as people with Parkinson's live in a frustrated world. That frustration comes from the fact that after 208 years, we still have no sign of a cure or even a drug that will help us or improve our Parkinson. COVID, they took 18 months and they had a vaccine. Parkinson, it's been 208 years and we're still waiting. And Simon Stott told me we're going to be waiting another 5 to 10 years. Thank you, Simon. Do you see any hope on the horizon from technology or from movement, disorder society, or from what your contacts are?
Well, let me address this in two ways because I think your frustration is real, and it's the same frustration we all feel. And that's when I first started getting ensconced in Parkinson's in 2007. That's really when I started becoming aware of the foundation, the Davis Phinney Foundation's message of living well, because we may be a ways off from a cure. And while we're trying to get to that cure, you have to do these things that are going to help you have the best quality of life until we get there. I'm more hopeful than I ever was. And back then I thought, man, we're decades away. It's coming far, far away. And again, I want to point back to the foundation. And they also have a book, by the way, called the Every Victory Counts Manual that they provide. And they have provided to tens of thousands of people over the years. And I only want to point that out because we've been talking about everyone's book, and I want to make sure we don't leave that behind. So that's a manual for doing the things you can do to live well today. But speaking directly to your question, speaking directly to what you're saying, stuff that I never thought was ever going to happen in my lifetime has happened much faster than I can ever believe. And I believe that there's changes in machine learning and approaches that are allowing us to scale things. And I'll give you a very good example. In Colorado, the only NIH sanctioned, that's a National Institute of Health sanctioned studies for stem cells, was done by a researcher named Kurt Fried. And that changed in the early 2000s. There's some politics I'm not going to get into. And that was kind of the end of that research, although he had gotten some very good results. And the next thing we were looking towards was called induced pluripotent stem cells. And they were having lots of troubles. And we had a nice research team with a MacArthur Genius Grant doing it, and they couldn't quite get where we needed to be. And we fast forward, and right now, there are human trials of induced pluripotent stem cells going on right now in Kyoto. And it's like the things that I said, I'll never see this in my lifetime. We're never going to fix this. I remember talking with someone that was on the scientific advisory board for the Phinney Foundation who had been part of some of that stem cell work. And he was like, I don't see it happening. I don't know why. So that's my hope, is that I say things that weren't happening, weren't making sense, weren't moving forward, all of a sudden they're happening kind of at light speed. And then Simon Stott, who you pointed to, is a perfect example of someone who probably sees that. He said, 2005, we were probably thinking we could get to a cure. That's what we were going towards. And in 2010, we're seeing the roadblocks. In 2015, we're still seeing some roadblocks. And now in 2020, maybe something will come. That doesn't mean that we're there. But I see technology, I see advances in technologies and advances in research moving us well forward.
Yeah, I did a TV interview on British television with Simon, and Simon was quoted as saying that 80% of the research on Parkinson has been done in the last 20 years. And this is a very exciting time for Parkinson's. I said, not if you've got it, thank you. But for scientific research, I can understand. They are finding out an awful lot of new things. Today they announced a new Alzheimer's drug. I don't know if you've seen that on the television. That's a major step forward in the neurological world. Maybe one day they'll announce a new Parkinson's drug. Who knows? But Simon said, don't hold your breath. So thank you, Simon.
I think that they'll get to something where it attacks a certain kind of like a LRRK2 or a certain genetic form, and then that'll be our foothold, and we'll work our way in there. But Simon is excellent.
Parkinson's is just too complicated. I'm quite sure there'll be something which is disease modifying, perhaps. But Polly, I don't know why we've never met, because we share a lot in common, and I have no idea why I never got your book. Probably because I never asked for it. Every victory counts.
It's easily accessible via download from our website. You can also read it on your Kindle. And we do have printed copies of that. Sending those outside of the United States is quite expensive, so those are not as easily accessible outside the US. We partnered with Parkinson Canada last year. So Parkinson's Canada has taken that manual, the Every Victory Counts manual, and made it, they've Canadianized it, made it more appropriate for a Canadian audience. And that was released last year. Actually this year. And they are also translating it or localizing it to French Canadian. So we hope through maybe partnerships with other organizations, other places, we can bring it to other countries and make it more applicable, the same kind of content, but make it a little bit more applicable to the social environments that people are living in and cultural differences.
I look forward to seeing it very much indeed. What I did want to do is, because this webinar is scheduled for 1 hour, I did want to ask each one of you to summarize in some keywords about living with Parkinson's from your point of view. What are the essential elements? And don't say exercise, because we got that, but how to exercise, how much to exercise, where to exercise, how to be motivated, how to eat, how to use technology. Melissa, if I could start with you, forgive me. What advice do you give to someone who walks through the door of one of your PD gyms and says, my life's in the trash can, what can I do?
Yeah, I think when people first walk through the door, I think the first thing is, you know, it's you've got to be kind to yourself. I think we've had so many patients that have walked in the door that have said, my body's betrayed me. What's going on? I've done everything right, and here I have Parkinson's. And I think it's that forgiveness that people need to have for themselves. Be kind to yourself and try and find that inner strength, that inner courage. As you've identified, I think with that can take you a long way, and part of that is building up your support network. So that makes it a little easier to be accountable to somebody, to have a lot of fun. I think, you know, if you're coming to exercise and it's challenging, it needs to be fun. Why on earth would you want to come back? So it's finding activities that you enjoy, doing it with people that you really want to do it with, and, you know, hanging out for that coffee at the end of it, if that's what gets you through the exercise class. I think, you know, those are key factors to building strength and continuity around exercise, but more importantly, living well with Parkinson's. And I think, you know, drag out that bucket list again. I think I meet so many people that self-stereotype and say, well, I've got Parkinson's, I can't possibly do that now. I can't go to Europe now that I've retired. I can't, you know, cycle up the Tour de France. And that's rubbish. You know, there's so much that people can do with their life. So drag that bucket list out again and pop that on the goal plan. And that's certainly one of the biggest things that I've found.
I agree. Polly, what is it about people with Parkinson's? We often find a lot of people who come to our centre, they think they can't do something because they've got Parkinson's. And then when we make them do it, they can do it perfectly well. And we underestimate ourselves. And I think that lack of self-esteem and lack of self-awareness is a major problem. But maybe you can give a few words of what you would say to someone like me who might walk off the road and say, I don't like this Parkinson's stuff. How can you help me?
Was that a question for me?
Yeah. How can you help me?
I'm not sure that's a one. There's no one answer for that. I would go back to encouraging you. Let's use you, Alex, as the person I'd be coaching. It would be to do probably 6 different things. Got to connect with your community. Find people. Find your people. 1. 2, find resources, that classes, etc. 3, if you're still working, implement a system that can support you and a work situation that can accommodate your new working style. And 4, set up your home now to accommodate you for the long term. Make your home safe to live in. And probably 5, really importantly, set up your routines. Your routine every single day. And one of the critical things that we haven't talked about is expose yourself to sunlight. 10 minutes of sunlight in the morning every single day. Even if you live in a cloudy area, get outside, natural sunlight, restart your circadian rhythm, will put you on to a good path. So routine. And then 6, find an advocate. Whether that's your care partner, that's a friend, that's a child, a doctor, a clinician, a physiotherapist, and have a system where that person checks in with you and you check in with that person to ensure that you are on the path and you are staying compliant with your routines and all of the things you need. That entire system all those things will support you long-term, even when you get stuck.
I need to contact you tomorrow, Polly, because I'm not doing any of those 6 things. So the only
I can
thing
be
I do,
advocate.
yeah, the only thing I do have is the routine of going into the office and going actually to use the gym. And I do it with the headphones on, listening to Sky News live from England, because my wife is not very keen on me listening to news in the house because it's always bad news. And I do half an hour, and no one sees me do it, so that's my little secret. I hate doing it, but I know I must, and it makes a huge difference. When COVID lockdown happened, I think a lot of us suffered. The next 2 webinars in this series are going to be hosted by people with Parkinson's. One will be Larry, obviously, from PD Avengers, and one will be Ben Stetcher, who had DBS and has had miraculous results. Pietro, there is a man called John Pepper, he lives in South Africa, who claims he cured himself using exercise at high intensity, and he goes for high intensity walks every morning, and he claims he cured himself from Parkinson's. Do you think exercise can cure you, or do you think it's a major step forward?
Exercise is important because it slows down progression of the disease. So I think that's a key word to say to our clients, just to exercise is important, and at this moment is the best you can do to live better with Parkinson. Of course, do what you like to do. So what you like to do is the best. Do what you're passionate at. Do everything you like, everything you laugh at, makes you laugh and makes you feel joy. That is important. And of course, get out of your house and your home and just walk and just do whatever you want. But exercise, yes, is the key.
Yeah, I can imagine what John's going to say, but I'm going to let him say it. A guy walks into your office, I don't like this Parkinson stuff. Why did it have to happen to me? What would be the words that come out of your mouth?
You hear that every now and then. I mean, you hear people looking back to, I was exposed to a chemical. I was working in an industrial environment, a military environment. And again, I think that's where I come back to the foundation kind of approach, where it's do the things you can do to live well today. Find the approaches that do the best for you. But I'll say this, looking at Melissa's background and all of her many millions of hours working on her approach, and Pietro, find a clinician and find a group of clinicians that really do nothing but work with Parkinson's and focus on understanding how to help you live better with your Parkinson's through their exercise and through the other components. And that's where I think the International Parkinson and Movement Disorder Society comes into play as the largest governing body for Parkinson's and related disorders all around the world, with more than 12,000 members. Find people that have that kind of expertise. Those people are going to help guide you towards the best quality of care. And again, I put Melissa, having worked probably with countless people with Parkinson's over the years, probably in that same boat. She does nothing but live, eat, and breathe that. That's the person you want. You want people with that kind of expertise. And Pietro, same situation. I'm not leaving you behind. I'm just saying, all I do is Parkinson's all the time, and that's what you want to find.
I must say that the expression we use, or I use often, is never ever give up. Always keep believing, even in bad times. I go off medicines in the evening and sometimes have problems because my DBS is playing up. And I don't like to take more levodopa because levodopa is not a good idea to take in quantity. So I literally crawl up the stairs to bed. I can't even walk properly. And somehow get into bed and just go to sleep. Next morning, get up, take the medicines, and I'm in the gym again. So you go through these moments which are tough, especially with advanced Parkinson's like I have. But you get through them and you get through to the other side, and the other side's so worthwhile getting through to. We are not victims, we are people who have a choice and we choose to live, and that I think is the message which I think we can all perhaps agree with. It's a choice, and I hope most people with Parkinson's who are listening to this broadcast will make the right choice. The choice to live, find experts like Melissa, like Polly, like Pietro and John, and get help, get support, get a routine, and don't be like me and try and avoid exercise. I think we can call it a night at this moment. I'd like to thank particularly Melissa, because now it must be virtually breakfast time. But thanks to everybody. And we're just going to run the ending sigla. That's the ending music, which our maestro hopefully will make work. Maestro, take it away. Thank you.